Welcome everyone this morning. I'm Councillor Kimberly Barrett. I'm Cabinet Member for Climate Change and Environment. Few housekeeping rules. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and the public gallery by the stairwells. Don't attempt to use the lifts, and we will assemble at Queen Victoria's statue in front of the civic offices. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust fire marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at the Guildhall reception desk should sign out when leaving the building at the end of today's meeting. Please, can everyone use the microphones and remember to switch them off when you have finished, otherwise the camera will remain on your beautiful faces. So to start off, if we could do introductions, that would be great. So I'll start off with Charlotte.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Charlotte Gerada, Labour Councillor for Central Southsea.
Councillor Russell Simpson, Hilsey Ward.
Hello, I'm Claire Seek from Share Portsmouth.
Good morning, Richard Lee, Regulatory Services Manager.
Okay. Christina Downey, Climate Change Officer.
Jane Dodino, Local Democracy Officer.
Thank you, everyone. Just to check, are there any apologies for absence today, Jane? No? Okay. Any declarations of interest from anybody at all today? No? All good? Okay. Then we will jump straight on to number 3, air quality assessment update from Richard. So I'll pass over to you, Richard.
Thank you, Chair. This is a paper for information, and it is an assessment of air quality update. The purpose of the report really is to set out the operational and legal responsibilities upon Portsmouth City Council in relation to air quality management and review and assessment of monitoring data. Our responsibilities as Portsmouth City Council are fairly wide, and they include the review and assessment, the formal responsibilities to assess the improvement or the deterioration of air quality within the city boundary, to provide a narrative in relation to our compliance with the national air quality objectives. We, of course, introduced a clean air zone, a CAS, fairly recently, and our requirements are to monitor the performance of that CAS throughout its life. We generally assess the impact of our additional actions taken across the city to improve air quality, and we have a formal responsibility to publish data through the annual status report. The update concentrates on nitrogen dioxide. I have not included a narrative in relation to particulates. The reason for that is we are perceived to be compliant with the national air quality objectives in relation to PM10 and PM2.5. However, historically, we have not achieved compliance in relation to nitrogen dioxide, hence my focus upon that within the report. I have stated within section 3 that we have not published our annual status report for 2022. I have engaged with DEFRA on this matter, and DEFRA are seeking us to do so in a relatively short period of time, and they are expecting us to have a submission of that annual status report by the end of February 2023. Should there be any further delays, then I will of course further engage with DEFRA and discuss the reasons and explanations for such with them. We have also, within section 3, we have of course received ministerial directions in relation to a couple of road links in Portsmouth in relation to non-compliance with the objective standards, and to introduce a CAS which will tackle those exceedances over a period of time. Over quite a number of years, we have been monitoring air quality levels within Portsmouth, but because of the levels of pollution which are exceeding the objective standards, and because of the ministerial directions, we have increased our level of monitoring quite significantly, and I have provided some information in respect to such in section 4. In regards to diffusion tubes, which are a relatively low-tech device but are compliant with DEFRA's requirements, you will see that the data I provided tells us that we have 233 sites currently, we had in 2021, and that was an increase of 763% from 2017. And if we look back just between 2020 and 2021, that was an increase of 45%. The narrative there is obviously that we are acutely aware of the interest of air quality data, and we are trying to provide as much information as we possibly can in relation to how we are performing as a local authority, how the CAS will be performing in the future, and of course to inform the public in relation to the interest in regards to pollutant levels and the impact upon public health. We've also fairly recently increased our number of continuous air quality monitoring stations, and we introduced a new station at the beginning of the life of, just before we introduced the CAS, so that we had some data, very accurate data, through a sophisticated monitoring device in Alfred Road. So again, we've got some additional information that we can provide to the government and to the public. Now, the demands upon the single FTE who has responsibilities for delivering this data set and writing the necessary reports has obviously increased quite dramatically. And that's part of the reason for the delay in publishing the 2022 ASR. But we are, of course, aware of the mandatory requirements to do so. And as I said, we hope to catch up on that report and to deliver the 2023 report on the 2022 monitoring data by increasing the resources that we have to the service. So we've gone through a process of trying to acquire funding. Those issues appear to be resolved, and we will recruit another officer to the ranks, so we'll have 2 FTE to assist with that process moving forward. It's worth saying that whilst we have not published the data has been captured and evaluated, and therefore we are confident that we will be able to publish the 2022 ASR. It is not a matter that the data has not been collected, it has, and I think it's very important to establish that point. I've also, in Section 6 and Section 7, provided a very brief update in relation to the levels of nitrogen dioxide in 2020 and 2021. Remembering, of course, that the 2022 ASR will focus upon 2021 data. It's always a year behind. There'll be no surprise that in 2020, of course, the pandemic hit, and the public and businesses were obviously under a number of restrictions, and as a result of that, the amount of traffic on our roads significantly fell. And therefore, if we compared the 2019 data with the 2020 data, there was generally a reduction in levels of nitrogen dioxide across the city with the monitoring locations. That's no surprise, but we should obviously have regard to that reduction and the impact of the restrictions during COVID at that time. Likewise, when we consider the data for 2021 in comparison with 2020, a number of those restrictions had been lifted, people were going back to work, people were able to have leisure time and go out and about. The level of traffic increased, the level of pollution therefore increased. So the increase from 2020 to 2021 should not be a surprise in relation to the comparison of those 2 years. It would be sensible, therefore, when we are looking at the 2022 data, that we compare not only with 2021 and 2020, but to the data that was available prior to the pandemic. And that is what the report will do once it's published. What I have suggested is that there are still a number of locations within Portsmouth in 2022 that still exceed the national air quality objectives. So air quality remains a considerable concern in relation to compliance, but of course in relation to the public health impacts of such pollution. In section 8, I've just tried to summarise the monitoring that is being undertaken in relation to the clean air zone. Now, I think I'll be correct in saying that the clean air zone was established at the end of 2021, and therefore we probably have about 13 or 14 months of that CAS being in place. Over the first year of the CAS monitoring, whilst we have a significant increase in the amount of data that is being collected, our contact with the government suggests that the performance of the CAS will be assessed in relation to modelled predictions of how it is performing in relation to reducing the levels of nitrogen dioxide, how it is complying with the ministerial direction to achieve compliance within the shortest possible time frame. The reason for that is any 1 year of data, particularly in relation to the complexities around data analysis with regards to COVID, isn't particularly useful. We have 1 year of data in relation to the CAS. We don't know what those levels were in the same detail prior to the CAS being formed, and of course we have the impact of COVID to consider. Therefore, moving forward into this second year of the CAS, there will be a heavier reliance upon monitored data, and that is why we predicted such and of course increased our monitoring network so significantly. During this period, we have of course engaged with DEFRA and a number of their agents, and they have a number of specialists who are looking at our data, and we need to ensure that they receive data from us more regularly than the previous reporting standards. So we're engaging with those on a quarterly basis so that they have the data and then they can track the performance of that CAS in relation to the data that's being provided. But through all that narrative, what I'm effectively saying is it's too early to assess the performance of the CAS, and we will be probably well into 2023 and perhaps 2024 before we have sufficient data to demonstrate whether the CAS has achieved its aim of achieving compliance. I am a compliance officer. As I said in my introduction, working within regulatory services, but it's very important to acknowledge the impact of pollution upon public health and the work of our colleagues to reduce levels of pollution beyond the compliance standards. Those colleagues are working on that. My responsibility, as I said at the beginning, is to report upon our review and assessment standards, how we are delivering them, and I concentrate on compliance rather than the public health agenda. But the public health agenda is very important. I hope the information provided has been useful. The ASR hopefully will be published towards the end of February, and I'm very happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Richard. I know I found this, thank you for the report, because I think it had a lot of information there, so it did answer a number of questions that I wanted to ask straight off the bat. I think what you said as well is really important to note that during the COVID times, you know, the traffic pollution, it did drop off, and I think it's an excellent example to show if we could get people out of their cars and onto public transport, what we could see as a city. So there's definitely a lot of work that we need to do in that regard, in regards to public transport, sort of better vehicles available for people. And I know it's quite expensive with electric vehicles, but it's sort of what we could aim towards, not just as a city, but as a country. But I just want to thank you for that report. I think it's very interesting, and I'm really pleased that we have got another officer coming in to support, because looking at the amount of data that we have coming in, we're going to need someone else as well. So thank you very much for that report. Happy to open it up to both of you. Yes, Charlotte, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Thank you, Richard, for the report. It was really comprehensive and really helpful to see the progress that's been made. Just had a question in relation to 7.4 about the monitoring at Fratton Road. I know that it says here that the data capture from the location was less than 25%, so therefore unreliable. But just anecdotally speaking, for anyone who goes down Fratton Road, they know that it's really congested. I've had lots of cyclists make complaints to me about how unsafe it is because of the amount of vehicles down there and the congestion and the number of illegally parked cars and that sort of thing. And I know that it was raised by colleagues of mine in Labour Group that when we were looking at the CAS about including that area as well, because clearly there might be people who are trying to avoid the CAS area and go down that road instead, and perhaps that has been increasing traffic in that area. And so while this data is unreliable, I just wondered if you had a sense of whether or not that was the case, and when you might have a clearer picture of whether or not this is happening. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Thank you. We do monitor not only within the geographical location of the CAS. Our monitoring network expands across the city, and of course that includes those roads where there is a high concentration of traffic and congestion. So stop-start movements, etc., always create additional pollution than free-flowing traffic. So I've mentioned Fratton Road, and we have previously talked about other roads where there is congestion, such as Eastern Road, again outside the geographical location. One of the reasons why we increased the monitoring so dramatically over the last few years is that we wanted to look at if there was a transfer of hotspots of pollution from the target area, which was the focus of those two link roads, as mentioned within the report, to other roads within the city. Now, historically, there have been hotspots outside the CAS, even before the CAS was considered and introduced. London Road has always been an area where there is a canyon effect. So you have buildings on each side of the road. That creates a dispersion problem in terms of the pollution. However, there has been a downward trend generally in relation to those areas over a period of 5 years. And when we look at previous annual status reports, not only are all the locations of the monitoring devices clearly provided in terms of maps and data points, etc., but we are aware, because of that network has been there for quite some period of time, that Fratton Road and other areas where there is stop-start traffic, there is congestion around traffic lights, etc., are a concern. In terms of validation of data, we look for around about 85%. Anything less than 85% are concerns in regards to how reliant we can be upon that annual average significantly deteriorates. And as in Fratton Road, as it clearly says in the report, it was around 25%. And therefore, whilst there is concern about those 3 months that there was data provided, we can't rely upon it. But it is indicative, perhaps, that there'll be a focus upon exactly what happens when we look at the 2022 data and the 2023 data. It's about statistics and data collection, and that is why we've tried to ensure that we have a very robust network of continuous monitoring stations and diffusion tubes. And we have engaged with the government about how they feel about how we have approached this subject. And I'm pleased to report that they are confident that we have a network which is suitable for assessing how we are doing across the city. It will be interesting to see what the 2023 data set looks like for Fratton Road and other roads of that type as we move forward.
Yes, so firstly, thank you for the report. I'm trying to, it's not a very good angle actually to talk at the same time. It must be incredibly difficult, actually, because I'm guessing, I mean, is the data's taken, is it taken all year round? Is it at different points? And of course, we know during the summer with certain festivals and certain things that happen, especially towards Moor Gunwharf, you're going to have obviously different data because the traffic's going to be a lot higher. So, but in general, when we have new things that are built in Portsmouth, then there tends to be more going towards it. So do you find that while there might these, you know, you all have a hotspot for a particular 1 year, but it might not be a repeat of the same year, or is it a case that once you see something that you is more of a hotspot, you go back to it and for the next year to see and compare the data?
The requirements in terms of compliance are fairly complicated, as you would expect from any kind of framework about how you monitor pollution levels and how you come to conclusions in relation to pollution. Now, I've made reference to an annual average, which is obviously over a 12-month period, but there are responsibilities upon us to report peaks in pollution levels. Now, a diffusion tube, which is exposed for a period of 30 days, is unable to provide us with a particular peak, which may be created over a weekend of a festival, for example, but our continuous monitoring stations allow us to do that, and that's why they're far more sophisticated, and effectively they can give us some real-time analysis. It's a slight delay, but if we call it real time, so we can track the levels of pollution along a road at any particular point in time. And you're right, there's seasonal variations. You'll be right, of course, we're used to an AM peak and a PM peak in terms of traffic moving through the city at school times, etc., and so on. And we would be able to track that pollution peak, which corresponds with the traffic peak, through those continuous monitoring stations. And the requirements are that a certain peak, I won't go into the technical information, but a certain peak should not be exceeded on a certain number of times per year. So whilst we talk about annual averages, because that's a very common way of talking about pollution, if you drill down to the data and the information within the ASR report, it will talk about peak levels and how many times those peak levels have exceeded the compliance standard at any point in the year. Our suggestions over the reporting year, remembering that 2022 will report upon 2021, that those peak levels of pollution will not exceed the compliance standard. So it is a complicated process, but you're absolutely right. During the days, during the weeks, Fridays might be busier than a Sunday, for example, at peak tourism times, etc., and so on, that levels of pollution might exceed certain compliance standards, but overall, when we're looking at all of those standards and we're trying to communicate those standards within the ASR, we're doing relatively well. However, there is still cause for concern.
Just about, yeah, because it might seem like stating the obvious, but you know, if we know those things are happening, then we can obviously provide better transport during those peak times. So we know, like for example, we say Victorious, and we know with the university they have quite a lot of electric buses now. So using those instead of cars to like a park and ride system would then decrease the amount that's the increase that we would expect because of that. I mean, the other reason I've mentioned it is because obviously the new Ravelin Sports Centre, which is literally up the road from Gunwharf, and I've noticed now the traffic's starting to get bigger. It's not just coming now down in from A3, it's now coming from other sides. So that area is becoming more of a hotspot for cars because more people finding different ways to get in and park closer instead of parking inside. So yeah, I didn't want to sound like I was stating the obvious, just kind of if we were knowing when those times are, we could essentially put in better systems to make people not coming in their cars, essentially, as well, among other things.
To come back on that, as I say, I am the compliance officer and I talk about levels of pollution. I have talked about public health, and of course this data is discussed with our public health colleagues. But just as importantly, perhaps even more importantly, this data is discuss with our transport colleagues. And of course, our transport team monitor the road network, and they even drill down to some of those peaks that we're talking about, where those hotspots are occurring, and working with events teams, etc., in relation to transport provided to events and those sorts of things. Of course, we know in Portsmouth that vehicles don't create all of the pollution that we're monitoring. I just monitor pollution. I can't say where it's coming from precisely, but we're aware, of course, that we have a port, we have industrial and domestic emissions of nitrogen dioxide, and of course we have transboundary pollution that's blown into our airspace from other areas of the country and of course abroad. But yeah, the point is that we share this information with our transport colleagues, and they actually provide a table of activities and actions that they are taking to try and combat some of the emissions from traffic using the city network.
Thank you. Yeah, just to add to that as well, obviously it's been made public that we've got the new bus fleet that are coming in that are all electric, all fantastic. When I talked to Councillor Lynn Stagg about sort of where it crosses over here into the traffic and transport side of things, one of the things we have been talking about is to see whether we can get those electric buses that come into the city specifically onto the routes that have the highest levels of pollution, so that we can start working on bringing that down from our side of things, from First side of things. So that's definitely something that where it crosses over, where we've been talking about. So hopefully going forward when that comes in, the routes that will be having the electric buses will potentially be those routes that are on the most heavily polluted areas of the city. So that's sort of our thoughts anyway, but happy to share information when we get it anyway. But any other questions at all, or no? And so thank you very much for that, Richard. Great report. I will then move on to item 4, so I'll pass over to Christina.
Thank you very much. Yes, so I am looking after agenda items 4 and 5, which are related. So these are in regard to 2 events that we held during last year's International COP, Conference of the Parties, which is the International Climate Change Negotiation Convention that happens every year, normally. For those in the room, I know I've spoken about this before the event as well, and previously they came to your decision meeting then with information about the event and hopefully what the events would entail and what would get out of it. So these reports have come forward again to this decision meeting, just as information reports to let you know a little bit more about what happened and who came and what we'll do next with them. So in that spirit, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, as you already know them just as well as I do at the moment. But Agenda 4 relates to a climate change simulation game that we held here in the Guildhall Chamber. It was a standalone event at the time, and we aimed it at high school age children, but we managed to get a few university students along as well from Portsmouth University. We had a good time, but it is an educational event as well, where we're given a short lecture to give information about climate change and how sort of modelling works, and then the game entailed that the participants had to negotiate various climate change parameters and sort of forestation parameters to negotiate a 1.5 or a maximum 2 degree increase in temperature by the year 2100. So those parameters that they negotiated by, we put them into a live model, and they could see the direct results of that. And I think it was a really good event, and it's not something that's been held in Portsmouth before or locally even as well. So we are just now working out how we'd like to run this event again, and I think we would, because it was really enjoyable, and I think met a lot of sort of climate anxiety needs as well, because you can see that, you know, it is possible to have a livable future. So we're just in that process now of working out how we'd like to run this again, and I think we would, and it doesn't have to just be run for schools, it can be run at other organisations and different complexities as well, so we'd definitely like to do that again. And since one of the organisers, the developers of this software from MIT University in the United States has reached out as well, I think she heard that we had run this and wanted to get more of a quote from us, and they were really enthusiastic that we'd done this and had such a positive response. And that's about it on that one. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Christina. I know I'm keen to hold this again and to get as many people involved as possible if my colleagues are up for it. I think it would be quite interesting as well. Obviously, we've done it with schools, so it would be great to do it with schools, but it could be quite interesting to have officers from various departments do it so that they can feed in. Maybe even councillors, although I think sometimes full council is enough for us, so perhaps we don't want to be arguing about that in here. But I think it'd be quite interesting to get as many people involved in this and hold it, not just for educational reasons for schools, but perhaps to bring in sort of, or even SMEs if they're interested, sort of, so they can see everything that we're trying to do, but also, you know, have their own feedback and as well, because I found it very interesting. But no, thank you for that. I don't know if colleagues have any questions or anything at all.
Just a comment, really, that I think it's really, really good. And I'm looking at this list here of all the locations that's going on for this year and next year. It'd be really great if we can double that, really.
Sorry.
It's a good opportunity to test the mics. It didn't work earlier. I was just wondering, if you do the event again, could we include people like some of the youth groups from Motivate and the youth service, because they are perhaps an unheard part of the population. I've got really good contacts at Motivate that I'll share with you, and she's got a really great group of young people, sort of 14 to 18, really keen to get involved in this sort of thing. So, yeah, I'll pass it on.
Yep, 100%. Let's do that.
The more people, the better, I say. So, great. Councillor Gerardo? No? Perfect. Okay. I will let you move on to the next item then.
Thank you very much. Agenda 5. So this is another climate change event we held during the same COP at the end of November last year. So this was a bit of a dually focused event we called the Green Partnership Charter event, where we wanted to launch not only our climate change strategy, but also hear about and reconnect with a lot of our partners within Portsmouth as well. So it was aimed at, so the initial event was aimed at sort of larger institutions in Portsmouth who have greater land holdings, custodians of lots of different buildings, or potentially more of an influence in Portsmouth emissions, who are sort of more, I don't know, in the environmental space, that have more potential to have more of a leverage of emissions than the standard sort of organisation or SME. So we developed a charter around that, invited those attendees, and we held an initial event here in the Guildhall as well. And I think it was really successful. Lots of people came, which was great, had a really good response from them. And since then, we've just been working out how we can carry on with that work and identify opportunities that actually we can work together on a really sort of bigger Portsmouth-wide problems, that we have a lot of crossovers in our work, whether they're the work operations or maybe they're where we work physically, if there's lots of transport issues that we can join forces on or bids we can work on together. It's focusing on those really big issues that we can potentially share resources, share tools, share ideas, share information to accelerate decarbonisation here in Portsmouth. We haven't held a second event yet, but we are gearing towards that now, and we have since had more interest from other organisations that want to join this working group. So we believe we'll hold a secondary event to just sort of get people, more organisations involved, and we'll get the process rolling of how we start working together.
Thank you, Christina. I think my whole thing with the Green Charter, which was an excellent event, and thank you colleagues for coming as well. I hope you found it interesting and good as well. But my whole thing was it's great to have people come along and sign up, but there really needs to be work and actions after that to carry on. You know, it's always great meeting in a room with like-minded people, but we need to move on from that and actually start doing things, which is what we are doing now. So I am really pleased that we are continuing this. And as Christina has said, we have had since then a lot of other organisations across the city, whether it's SMEs or larger employers, want to come along, sign this and get involved as well. And being able to share some of our resources, the funding as well, because we as a council, we're not allowed to apply for certain funding. Some of these other people are, so if we can support them in that to help with decarbonisation, greening, anything like that at all, then that's only a good thing. So I wanted to thank you for bringing that forward again. Colleagues, anything at all? No? Perfect. Okay. Good job, Christina. Well done. Thank you very much. And then we will now move on to item 6 then. So I'll pass over to Zoe for the Queen's Canopy.
Thank you. So I'm doing items 6 and 7. I've just got 7 up first. I'll change it. Right, there we go. Item 6. So this is an update about the Forgotten Places programme that we achieved £79,000 funding for to plant in 2021-2022. So following the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, the government issued some more money to its partners and lead delivery partners of the Queen's Green Canopy and offered some commemorative planting events to take place. And Portsmouth were chosen as one of those partners, and they actually only awarded the money to 4 cities in the country, I think, in the end, and which is a great result for us. And it's a real tribute to how well we've worked with Trees for Cities as an organisation and how much they kind of value the work that we're doing. Sorry, this is a bit off plan, not quite to the wording of the things, there's just more to say. So we've been awarded £30,000 to deliver a commemorative planting events in Portsmouth, and we've chosen to do that in schools with a view to support our young people and educate them from a really young age about the importance of tree planting and what they do for our city. So we've got 2 planting events coming up, which invites have gone out now. One is the 4th of February at Moorings Way School, and one is on the 4th of March at Castleview School in Paulsgrove. So one is infant school children and one is secondary school children, so it's a really nice mix. The idea is that every child will plant a tree in memory of the late Queen Elizabeth and will register that on the Queen's Green Canopy, as well as having volunteers there from Charles Dickens Community Orchards and the tree wardens. And hopefully we're going to have some of the lead officers from the National Tree Wardens come on the day, especially to Castleview, because they really want to come and do some education around the importance of tree planting in the city with young people, as Paulsgrove's been the only area in the city so far that we've had damage to any of the trees that we've planted, so that'll be a really nice addition. So yeah, just wanted to share that really, that we've got that additional funding. It's a really nice opportunity and I hope to see as many people there on the days.
Thank you, Zoe, and congratulations on getting even more funding. Obviously, as people know, we have got what I call the greening pot of money for the city where we can do these things, but by getting these grants coming through, it means that we can do even more and we can spread across the whole city. And what we've been talking about as well is that we don't just focus on one area, we try and go across the whole city, because if we can plant across the whole city in various schools, various locations, and I know a lot of people tend to think we focus on the south rather than the north. Well, we're trying to do both here, so we're focusing on everything possible. It's been great that the schools have been so involved and so keen, especially with all the things that they've got going on at the moment. In fact, I had a conversation with Moorings Way this morning to catch up with them, and they are really excited. I also spoke to Trish, who's from the Charles Dickens Orchard over the weekend, when I've done some tree planting with her this weekend. They're really excited. They said it's great that we're doing this in schools. I know, Councillor Gerarda, I know that you've done it at Manor School. You've done a planting day, wasn't it, a little while ago? I can't remember what school it was. I know there was a school that done a load of planting. Brambles, sorry, that's it, yes, yeah. So doing more like that in the community, fantastic. So thank you very much for that. Councillors, I don't know if there's anything you want to add at all, or...
Just to say thank you. You're doing really well at getting lots of pots of funding for lots of trees at the moment and for greening, so thank you. Thank you.
I actually totaled it up, and in the last sort of 18 months, we've been awarded £350,000 in total from different grant pots. So it's really made the Green City Fund be able to be stretched, particularly with sort of, you know, financial issues that we may face in the future with the cost of living crisis. So yeah, it's really good stuff. I'm really pleased.
Congratulations again. Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments at all? No? Okay, then we will move on to agenda item 7, so I'll pass straight back.
Sorry about the glasses on and off, but I can't see with them on and I can't see that with them off. Right, so this next one, again, is a funding round, and this is the Urban Tree Challenge Fund, which is a key component of the government's £750 million Nature for Climate Fund and provides funding to plant trees outside of woodlands. So it's mainly focused on urban cities around the country, enabling us to keep up with our woodland plans where we don't have so many areas of natural woodlands as other parts of the country. So the Urban Tree Challenge Fund supports planting of large standard trees in urban areas which make immediate impact to communities. It's available to anyone who has management control of the land, including local authorities and private landowners, to level up access to nature across the country. So what we are looking to do is plant in urban areas with higher scores awarded for planting in socially deprived areas with low canopy cover. So we've already been awarded this fund once. We got that last year, and we focused that money on planting in Buckland and Somerstown, where we have areas with the lowest sort of areas of health inequality and poorest areas of green infrastructure. We've got over 40% of families living there with no access to green space. The next round that we've been awarded with this funding, we've focused it on very different areas. We've supported some planting on the east-west corridor of Fawcett Road. I'll send everybody a map, and it's probably much more helpful after this meeting. Alexandra Park, King George Plainfield, some more schools. So you can see it's really kind of varied. We've really kind of tried to spread the funding around the city as much as we can. So the idea of trees outside of woodlands for this fund is to reduce noise and air pollution from busy roads, provide shade and windbreaks, and to aid sustainable urban drainage. There's many benefits, including sort of the wellbeing benefits of nature at the heart of the communities. And when we deliver some of this planting, which will all be delivered in winter 23-24 now, the idea is that we will have community planting events. Oh, sorry, the list is in there in 4.2 on the outcome there. So there will be community events at King George Plainfield. We've got stuff going on in Maureen's Way this year that we've already talked about. Alexandra Park is complete, and Great Sultans has been passed over to next year because we couldn't get that in time. So with the Great Sultans event, we're going to engage with Portsmouth Southsea tree wardens and try to make that more of a community planting event as well. I should say what happened with this fund is we found out about the award of £61,000 very late, so it was almost a bit too late to order the tree stock and get the planting days in time for this year. So as I say, the only ones we're going to manage is Maureen's Way and Alexandra Park, and everything else has been moved over to next winter, which is not a problem. It's all been approved and we can keep the funds. So yeah, I think that's it. So it's another really great award. And we've been told that we've probably only got about 2 more years left of this DEFRA funding before they stop awarding it. So we've just got to make the most of it and grab as much as we can and really implement all this planting while we've got the opportunity to get the grants.
Thank you very much. Once again, well done for getting the award. And like you said, I think we need to just carry on applying while it's there and getting as much as possible to continue in doing this work going forward and across the city as well. Obviously, we're trying to increase the tree canopy cover across the city because we have one of the lowest levels in the whole country. So that is one of our aims over the next few years, to build that right up. And one thing that I've found when I'm talking to people and looking at the locations we've been doing is that, especially with the schools, where they have the space to go out and play, there is, and if it's concrete or if it's not, there is literally no shade available for them to go in. So during the summer months, that's not great. You want children to go out and play, enjoy get some clean air in, and if it's absolutely boiling and you've got a concrete playground where it's just reflecting that heat, it is not ideal. So, I mean, that's what we've talked about at Moorings Way School and New Horizons, because that will add to the kids being able to go out and relax outside in between lessons. So, no, thank you very much for that. It's a good report. Any questions at all?
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Zoe. Another really excellent project that you're working on. Really fantastic. I just wondered, I mean, with these pots of funding and any others we get, how are decisions being made about locations? And is there going to be a kind of spread, like with schools, for example, spread across the whole city?
I'll start with the schools. We ask all local schools if they'd be interested in the funding and where we could plant, so work with the ones that come forward. We've got 11 schools on the list at the moment all over the city who've said that they're interested in additional planting on their school sites. Also, we liaise with our landscape architects who look after the contracts for some of the PCC schools, and they will advise us on which schools are really in desperate need. So New Horizons was one, for example, that our architect said we really need to get some funding and support the school to have better outside space. With projects in other areas, I normally put a call out to our colleagues across different directorates to say, to look at the land that they're responsible for and see where we need additional planting. So some of our arboricultural officers, our regeneration team, our COLAS partners, people like that, and just get some advice really about where they see the need and where we think we can deliver projects. And then we pull all of that together to go into the grant. So we don't get the money and then choose. We have to decide first and then apply for the grant based on where we think we can deliver. So, for example, the next big grant that's coming up is the Local Authority Treescape Fund. It's a really big grant, and that is open in March. So already I've started working with those teams to think about what we think we could deliver in 23-24 and 24-25. So if you do have any suggestions, please do send them forward and we can start thinking about including them in the next round of grants.
Councillor Simpson, I don't know if there's anything at all, or...
Yeah, I think because I think we had spoken about this a few committees ago, where we'd talked about certain areas that could be really good areas to have certain tree planting. But I think going back to the schools would be a really good idea. I definitely feel that there's, especially, I want to say mention my ward, but since Trafalgar had UTC built to it, we obviously lost some trees, and it'd be really, really good to get some more kind of replacements of the ones that were lost.
I'm really hoping that our Community Day in Castle View on the 4th of March will be a really nice event out of the main island of the city to kind of engage local people in that area as well, so that hopefully we can spread the work in that area of the city. We did have a few schools from Cosham come forward that were interested, not any in Hilsey, unfortunately, but if you've got links for Trafalgar, we're always very interested. I think it'd be a really great site, especially on that roundabout, that area where air quality is quite poor. So that'd be a really good school to look at.
Might as well just take the opportunity to plug some schools in my patch as well, while Councillor Simpson's had a go. I did recently meet the head teacher of Priory School, and sorry, it's really hard, I can't see you, so I'm going to have to just talk to the chair. Yeah, he was quite desperate to do some greening, and there's a lot of space for it in the school, but obviously it's very it's a bit of an urban jungle in there. It's very sort of concrete heavy, and but there is the space for greening and for improvement, so I know that he's pretty keen, and I think he would be a good person to approach potentially.
Stuart Vaughan. Yeah, I know Stuart quite well. We would love to work there. It's completely concrete. They have no green space at all, apart from they've got a mugger that's not even grass. But they didn't come forward when we put the offer out through the head teacher's bulletin, which was a real shame. So I would certainly try again. That would be an amazing school. They'd be a great school for the Trees for Schools programme, where we can build up on concrete spaces. So yeah, I'll reach out to him.
Thank you very much. Yeah, as Zoe said, we did put it out on the Portsmouth Education Board, which we did get a bit of feedback. We've had some schools that have sort of stepped back at the moment with everything going on. And there were quite a few schools that we were talking about, and Priory would be great, because that was one of the ones I was thinking of, where it's just literally grey space. Any kind of greening there would be fantastic. And unfortunately, a lot of the schools around the city are in exactly the same position, that, you know, they've got playground space, which is absolutely fantastic, but it's concreted and it's just not fun. And there's so many things that, especially with the infant schools, some of them that we've been talking to, that they're willing, if they can get greening into their playgrounds, that they're willing to do some sort of education in regards to it with their lesson plans, which is only a great thing going forward. So that would be fantastic. So I'll leave that with Zoe anyway to have a talk to, and, you know, if you can liaise as well, that would be great. Sorry, I thought you were going to...
Yeah, just to say, the East-West Active Travel Corridor that we're going to be planting next year actually runs along the side of Priory and down to that road, so it could be really nice to kind of link the two, and perhaps then some of the young people from school could come out and do some of the plant, and it's quite a busy road, but I'm sure we could sort something out. I think that would be quite a nice way of bringing them in.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or anything at all? No, great. Okay, thank you very much for that, Zoe. I think that's, let's have a look. I think that's the end of today. Yes, that is. So thank you very much, colleagues, for your time today. If possible, would you both be able to stay behind for a few minutes so we can have a chat about something? But if anyone's watching, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next month.